The death that started everything. The alarm screamed through the medical center like a wounded animal. Commander Sarah Mitchell ran down the corridor, her boots echoing against metal floors. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She burst through the double doors into the isolation ward and stopped cold. 12 more beds were filled since this morning. 12 more colonists lay dying from something nobody understood. Their skin had turned gray like ash. Their eyes were clouded white. Blood vessels showed dark beneath their skin like cracks in broken glass. They struggled to breathe through fluid-filled lungs. Dr. James Park looked up from his medical scanner. His face was pale. His hands shook. "Commander, it's spreading faster now. We've lost 8 people in the last 6 hours. The antibiotics aren't working. The antivirals aren't working. Nothing we have is slowing this down." Sarah forced herself to walk closer to the beds. She recognized the woman in the nearest one. Her name was Maria Chin. She taught mathematics at the colony school. 3 days ago she had been laughing at the harvest festival. Now she could barely open her eyes. "How many total?" Sarah asked quietly. 247 infected. 31 dead. "At this rate, everyone in the colony will be sick within 2 weeks. Park removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "We're a frontier colony, Commander. We don't have the advanced medical facilities that Earth has. We can't synthesize complex medications here. We're farmers and miners, not research scientists." Sarah walked to the window and looked out at Arcturus Point. The colony stretched across the valley below. Small prefabricated homes clustered around the central square. Fields of modified wheat glowed golden in the afternoon sun. Beyond the fields, the mining operation extracted rare minerals from the mountains. 8,000 people called this place home. They had left Earth to build something new. They had worked for 5 years to make this barren planet livable. Now a plague was killing them and she had no way to stop it. "What about Earth?" she asked without turning around. "How long until they can send help?" "I sent the emergency request 4 days ago. The response came back this morning. The nearest medical ship is 3 months away. They're dealing with an outbreak on the Titan colonies. They can't redirect resources until that crisis is contained." 3 months. Sarah closed her eyes. "In 3 months, everyone here would be dead." "Keep doing what you can," she said finally. "Try every treatment protocol in the database. Mix medications and new combinations. Experiment. We have nothing to lose now." She left the medical center and walked through the colony streets. People watched her from their windows. They saw their commander walking with her head up and her shoulders straight. They thought she had answers. They thought she would save them. But Sarah felt hollow inside. She had led these people out here to the frontier. She had promised them a new life. Now she was going to watch them all die. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her office. She stared at the communication console. The distress signal had been broadcasting continuously for 4 days. It went out in all directions across the sector of space. Earth had responded, but Earth was too far away. Nobody else had answered. The frontier territories were mostly empty. A few alien species had colonies in neighboring systems, but most species avoided this region. The resources were poor. The planets were difficult to terraform. Only humans were stubborn enough or desperate enough to settle out here. Sarah had read about the Vrexians. They controlled 3 systems about 15 light-years away. They were an old species with advanced technology. Their biological sciences were supposedly centuries ahead of human knowledge. But they never responded to human communications. They never traded with humans. They made it clear they wanted nothing to do with humanity. Still, Sarah opened a new communication window. She recorded a message, speaking slowly and clearly. "This is Commander Sarah Mitchell of the human colony on Arcturus Point. We have an unknown pathogen killing our people. We lack the medical technology to synthesize a cure. We are requesting humanitarian assistance from any species with advanced biological science capabilities. We can offer payment in rare minerals or future trade agreements. Please, we have 8,000 civilians including 2,000 children. We need help." She sent the message toward Vrexian space and watched it disappear into the darkness. Then she put her head down on her desk and cried for the first time since the plague began. 2 days later, a ship appeared in orbit. Sarah was in the medical center when the alert came through. An unidentified vessel had entered the system. It was broadcasting Vrexian identification codes. Her hands shook as she opened the communication channel. The face that appeared on her screen was not human. The Vrexian had smooth blue-gray skin stretched over angular bone structure. Large golden eyes with vertical pupils studied her with obvious intelligence. He had no hair, but delicate patterns of darker blue traced across his scalp like tattoos. "Commander Mitchell," he said in perfect English with only a slight musical accent. "I am Chief Medical Scientist Theron of the Vrexian Republic. I received your distress call. I am here to help." Sarah could barely speak. "You came. You actually came. Your message reached our monitoring stations. I reviewed the medical data you included with your transmission. This pathogen is fascinating and extremely dangerous. My government ordered me to ignore your request. They said humans are not our concern. They said we should avoid involvement in human affairs." Theron's expression did not change, but something shifted in his golden eyes. "I chose to disobey that order. I am here without official authorization from my government. I brought medical equipment and research databases. I cannot promise success, but I can promise effort." Within hours, Theron had established a laboratory in the medical center. He brought equipment that looked like artwork made from crystal and light. His scanners were silent and produced three-dimensional holographic displays. His analysis tools could sequence genetic material in minutes instead of hours. Sarah watched him work. He moved with precise grace, his long fingers manipulating controls that responded to thought as much as touch. He did not eat. He did not sleep. For 3 days straight he studied the pathogen from every possible angle. "It is adaptive," he explained during one brief pause. "Every time your immune systems begin to fight it, the pathogen changes. It learns from each encounter. This is not natural. Someone engineered this disease, probably as a weapon long ago. It has been dormant in your soil. Your agricultural activities awakened it. Can you cure it?" Sarah asked. Theron looked at her with those unreadable golden eyes. "I do not know. The complexity is extraordinary. But I will try every method available to me." Dr. Park worked alongside Theron, learning as much as he could. The Vrexian shared his knowledge freely, explaining his processes and theories. He showed Park how Vrexian medical technology worked on principles that humans had not yet discovered. On the 5th day, Theron called Sarah to the laboratory. He looked exhausted. His skin had lost some of its color. But he held a vial of glowing blue liquid. "I believe this will work," he said quietly. "The pathogen cannot adapt if we attack it from 17 different biochemical pathways simultaneously. This treatment targets its core replication mechanism from multiple angles at once. It should neutralize the disease in 6 to 8 hours. "Should," Sarah repeated. "Nothing in medicine is certain, Commander. But this is the best answer I can provide. We should begin with your most critical patients immediately." The treatment worked. Maria Chin opened her eyes 6 hours after receiving the injection. Her skin regained normal color. Her breathing cleared. Within 12 hours she was sitting up and asking for food. Over the next week, every infected colonist received the treatment. Every single one recovered. The death toll stopped at 31. 8,000 people lived because one Vrexian scientist had chosen compassion over orders. Sarah found Theron in his laboratory on the day he prepared to leave. He was packing his equipment carefully into crystalline cases. "How can I possibly thank you?" she asked. "You saved us all. Name your price. We'll give you anything we have." Theron paused in his packing. He turned to face her fully. "Commander Mitchell, I do not require payment. I came here because I chose to come. I helped because helping was the correct action. But you violated your government's orders. Won't there be consequences for you? Perhaps. But some things matter more than following orders. Your people were dying. I had knowledge that could save them. Choosing not to help would have been wrong, regardless of what my government believes." Sarah removed the chain from around her neck. Attached to it was a small crystal fragment that glowed with inner light. It came from the unique mineral deposits of Arcturus Point. She pressed it into Theron's hand. "This is called a promise token in human culture," she said. "It means if you ever need help, if you ever call for me, I will come. No matter what. No matter the cost. This is my oath to you, Theron. You gave us our lives back. That debt can never truly be repaid, but I swear I will remember what you did." Theron looked at the crystal for a long moment. Then he carefully placed it in a protective case and hung it around his own neck. "I hope I never need to use this," he said softly. "But I am honored to receive it. Perhaps humans and Vrexians can be friends after all, Commander Mitchell. Perhaps there is hope for our species to understand each other." Sarah watched his ship leave orbit. She stood at the window in her office as the Vrexian vessel accelerated away toward his home space. She touched her chest where the crystal had hung for 5 years. Now it was gone, but the promise remained. 20 years passed like water flowing downstream. Sarah Mitchell was no longer a frontier colony commander. She had risen through the ranks to become Admiral Mitchell, commanding the human defense fleet in 3 sectors. Her hair had gone gray. Her face showed lines earned through years of difficult decisions. But her eyes remained sharp and determined. Arcturus Point had grown into a thriving world with 50,000 inhabitants. The plague was remembered in history lessons and memorials. Every year on the anniversary of their salvation, the colonists held a festival called Theron's Day. They told their children about the alien scientist who had saved them all. Sarah had tried many times over the years to contact Theron. She sent messages to Vrection Space thanking him, asking how he was, offering friendship. None of her messages ever received responses. The Vrection government maintained its isolationist policies. They refused all contact with humanity. She wondered if Theron had been punished for helping her. She wondered if he regretted his choice. She wondered if he ever thought about the 8,000 humans he had saved. Then one night, a message came through on an old emergency channel that nobody used anymore. The encryption was Vrection. The priority code made alarms sound throughout the fleet command center. Sarah's hands shook as she decoded the message. A video began to play. Theron appeared on her screen. He looked much older now. His skin had deepened to darker gray. His golden eyes were tired. He sat in what looked like an underground shelter. Explosions rumbled in the background. "Admiral Mitchell," he said, and his voice carried the weight of desperation. "I do not know if you will receive this message. I do not know if you still remember me. 20 years is a long time for humans. But I have no other options remaining." He paused, gathering strength to continue. "The Krillian swarm has entered Vrection Space. They are a hive mind species that consumes entire civilizations. They have destroyed 17 colonies in the past 2 months. Our military forces cannot stop them. We are evacuating the homeworld, but we lack sufficient transport vessels. 3 million civilians remain on the surface with no way to escape. The swarm will reach us in 4 days." Theron looked directly at the camera. Sarah saw the same compassionate intelligence in his eyes that had saved her colony 2 decades ago. "I'm not asking you to fight for us. I'm asking if you know anyone with transport ships who might help evacuate civilians. I will pay anything, promise anything. I just need to get these people away before the swarm arrives." The message ended with coordinates and a timestamp. Sarah stared at the blank screen for a long time. Her mind raced through calculations. Vrection Space was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. The swarm would arrive in 4 days. It was impossible. But Theron had traveled 5 days to reach Arcturus Point when nobody else would help. He had worked himself to exhaustion to save people he had never met. He had violated his government's orders because saving lives mattered more than politics. She touched her chest where the promise token had once hung. She had sworn an oath 20 years ago. She had promised that if Theron ever called for help, she would come. Admiral Mitchell opened a fleet-wide communication channel. Thousands of officers and crew members appeared on screens throughout the command center. "This is Admiral Mitchell," she said in a voice that carried absolute authority. 20 years ago, a Vrection scientist named Theron saved 8,000 human lives on Arcturus Point. He asked for nothing in return except friendship. Now his people face extinction and he has called for help. I am assembling an emergency response fleet immediately. All ships with transport capacity are to report their availability within the hour. This is a volunteer mission. I cannot order anyone to risk their lives for aliens who have never been our allies. But I can ask you to remember what compassion means. I can ask you to honor a debt that humanity owes." She paused, letting her words settle. Theron came when nobody else would. Now it is our turn. Who will stand with me? The responses came flooding in before she finished speaking. The galaxy remembers. The communication channels exploded with activity. Within minutes, Sarah's console displayed hundreds of incoming messages. Ship captains volunteering their vessels. Civilian freighters offering cargo space. Military transports requesting permission to join the rescue mission. The numbers kept climbing. Captain Rodriguez of the heavy freighter Stellar Dawn was first. "Admiral, I was 6 years old on Arcturus Point during the plague. Theron saved my mother. Count me in." Commander Jackson from the destroyer Vigilant. "My sister was one of the 31 who died before Theron arrived. If he had come 1 day earlier, she might have lived. I owe him for everyone he did save. We're ready to go." The merchant Captain Lin from Fortune's Wind. "I don't know Theron personally, Admiral. But I know what it means to help people who need it. My ship is available." Within 6 hours, Sarah had commitments from 400 vessels. Within 12 hours, that number had doubled. Ships came from across human space. Military escorts, cargo haulers, colony transports, even luxury passenger liners. Their captains all had the same message. Theron had saved humanity when humanity needed saving. Now humanity would return that kindness. But Sarah stared at the tactical display with growing concern. 800 ships was impressive, but Vrexian space was 3 weeks away. The Krillian swarm would reach the Vrexian homeworld in 4 days. Simple mathematics said they could not arrive in time. Dr. Park, now chief medical officer for the entire sector, stood beside her command chair. He had aged too, his hair completely white now. But his eyes still held the sharp intelligence she remembered from those desperate days fighting the plague. "We can't get there fast enough," he said quietly. "Even if we pushed the engines beyond safety limits, we'd arrive 2 weeks too late." Sarah nodded slowly. "I know. But we have to try anyway. Maybe we can help with evacuation efforts afterward. Maybe we can provide medical support to survivors. Maybe." "Admiral Mitchell." The voice came from her communications officer. "You have an incoming message. It's encoded with Galactic Council protocols, but the source is unusual. Put it through." The face that appeared on the main view screen was not human. It belonged to a Keltharian, a species known for their skill with engineering and their neutral stance in galactic politics. This particular Keltharian had deep green scales and intelligent amber eyes. "Admiral Mitchell, I am Captain Varix of the merchant vessel Wandering Star. I intercepted your fleet communications regarding the Vrexian crisis. I have never met you or this scientist Theron. But 6 years ago, a human engineering crew helped repair my ship when we suffered a catastrophic failure in deep space. They worked for 3 days straight without sleep. They refused payment. They said they were glad to help." Varix paused, his expression unreadable by human standards. "I cannot reach the Vrexian homeworld in 4 days. But I know someone who might be able to help with your timing problem. Stand by for additional communication." The screen switched to another face. This one belonged to a Dralaxian, a species famous for their mastery of faster-than-light technology. The Dralaxian had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on her elongated head. Her skin shimmered with iridescent patterns. "Admiral Mitchell, I am Engineer Solace. Captain Varix contacted me through our trade network. I understand you face a timing problem. I may have a solution. The Dralaxian Consortium has been testing advanced slipstream generators. They can create temporary corridors through higher dimensional space. One generator can move a ship 4 times faster than conventional drives. 10 generators working together can move an entire fleet." Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "How many generators do you have?" "I have access to 3. But I know others who have them. Give me 6 hours to make communications. I believe we can assemble enough generators to move your fleet much faster." "Why would you help us?" "The Dralaxian Consortium has no treaties with humanity." Solace made a gesture that might have been a smile. "Because 12 years ago human doctors saved my daughter from a genetic disorder that our own medicine could not cure. They traveled to our homeworld specifically to help her. They asked for nothing except to know that she lived. My daughter is now a scientist herself. When I tell her I helped humans save an entire species, she will be proud of what her parent did." The communications kept coming. Species from across the galaxy contacted Sarah's fleet. Each one had a story. Each one remembered a moment when humans had helped them. The Thorsian Mining Guild offered their heavy transport ships. A human prospector had once shared his claim with Thorsian miners when their own site failed. He had saved them from bankruptcy and ruin. The Silicon Medical Collective sent 3 hospital ships. Human researchers had freely shared breakthrough treatments for a disease that plagued Silicon children. They had not patented the cure or demanded licensing fees. They just gave it away. A fleet of Orion privateers, usually known for their independence and suspicion of outsiders, volunteered their fast attack ships. A human merchant had once testified on behalf of an Orion captain falsely accused of piracy. The testimony had saved the captain from execution. Even species that had never directly interacted with humans joined the growing armada. They had heard stories. They had seen evidence of human compassion spreading across the galaxy like seeds scattered by wind. They wanted to be part of something that mattered. Within 18 hours of sending her initial message, Sarah commanded an unprecedented coalition fleet of over 800 vessels from 17 different species. The Dralaxians had assembled 12 slipstream generators. According to their calculations, the generators could move the entire fleet to Vrexian space in 5 days. "We'll be 1 day late," Sarah said, studying the numbers. "The swarm will have already arrived." "Then we fight," said Commander Jackson from the Vigilant. We evacuate who we can and hold off the swarm long enough to get civilians to safety. Sarah opened a fleet-wide channel. Hundreds of faces from dozens of species appeared on screens throughout the command bridge. Captains, you all know the situation. We are assembling the largest multi-species fleet in galactic history. We are doing this without government approval, without military authority, without official sanction from any interstellar body. We are doing this because one Vrexian scientist chose compassion over politics 20 years ago. That single choice is about to save an entire civilization. She paused, making sure her next words carried the weight they deserved. Some of you will not come home from this mission. The Krillian swarm is one of the most dangerous forces in known space. They have destroyed civilizations that had millennia to prepare for war. We are merchants and miners, doctors and engineers. Most of us have never seen combat. We are going into a war zone to face an enemy that views us as nothing more than resources to consume. Sarah stood up from her command chair. She placed her hand over her heart in a human gesture of sincerity. But we are going anyway. Because compassion demands it. Because honor requires it. Because every being in this fleet understands that some things matter more than safety or profit or politics. We are going to show the galaxy what real strength looks like. Not military power. Not weapons or technology. But the strength that comes from beings who choose to help each other, no matter the cost. The response was immediate. Ship captains from every species began activating their communication systems. They sent messages back to their homeworlds. They contacted their families. They prepared their crews for what was coming. The fleet assembled in formation. The Dralaxian slipstream generators positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the formation. Sarah watched as the generators began to glow with blue-white energy. Space itself seemed to bend and fold around the massive fleet. All ships report ready, her tactical officer announced. Take us to Vrexian space, Sarah commanded. Maximum speed. The generators activated. Reality twisted. The stars stretched and blurred. The fleet accelerated beyond anything conventional drives could achieve. They were racing through spacetime itself, carried by technology and determination in equal measure. The journey took 5 days that felt like 5 minutes and 5 years at the same time. Sarah spent the time coordinating with her captains. They planned evacuation procedures. They organized medical teams. They prepared for combat against an enemy none of them truly understood. Messages came from Earth during the journey. The human government demanded she turn back. This was an unauthorized military operation. She was risking a diplomatic incident with multiple species. She was violating about 17 different interstellar treaties. Sarah ignored every message. Some orders deserved to be disobeyed. On the 5th day they emerged into Vrexian space. The sight that greeted them made even hardened military officers gasp. The Vrexian homeworld hung in space like a jewel under siege. It was beautiful, a world of blue oceans and green continents wrapped in white clouds. But surrounding it was a nightmare made real. The Krillian swarm looked like living darkness spreading across space. Millions of organic ships formed patterns that hurt to look at directly. They moved with perfect coordination, guided by the hive intelligence that connected every individual into one vast consciousness. Some ships were small, the size of fighters. Others were massive, larger than human carriers. They were all made from the same chitinous material, grown rather than built. The Vrexian defense fleet fought with desperate courage. Their ships darted between swarm vessels, firing weapons that burned with purple energy. But Sarah could see they were losing. For every swarm ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. The Vrexians were being overwhelmed by simple numbers. Multiple cities on the surface are under attack, her tactical officer reported. I'm reading massive civilian population centers with no evacuation in progress. The swarm has achieved orbital superiority. They're landing ground forces. Sarah opened a communication channel to the Vrexian Defense Command. This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Human Defense Fleet. We are here to assist with civilian evacuation. Please coordinate landing zones and population distribution. The face that appeared on her screen was Vrexian, but not Theron. This was a military officer with darker skin and eyes that burned with exhaustion and stress. Admiral Mitchell, I am Fleet Commander Sareth. Your timing is impossible. How did you get here so fast? We sent the evacuation request only 6 days ago. Theron called for help. We came. Where is he? Chief Scientist Theron is on the surface in Capital City. The research district is surrounded by swarm forces. We cannot break through to evacuate that sector. Sareth's voice carried grief. He will not survive the night. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. She had not traveled across the galaxy and assembled an unprecedented fleet just to arrive too late. "Commander Jackson," she said without looking away from Saratha's face. "Take the Vigilant and 6 escort ships. Break through to the research district. Get Theron out of there." "Admiral, those are swarm-controlled zones. We'll have to fight through." "I know what I'm asking. Do it anyway." Jackson's response came immediately. "Yes, Admiral. We're going in." Sarah turned her attention back to the full fleet. "All transport vessels, begin landing operations immediately. Coordinate with Vrexian ground forces for evacuation points. Military escorts, establish air superiority over the landing zones. Medical ships, prepare to receive casualties. This is not a rescue mission anymore. This is war, and we are going to win it." The fleet exploded into action. Hundreds of ships dove toward the Vrexian homeworld. They moved with precision despite coming from dozens of different species with different technologies and tactics. They moved as one because they all understood what they were fighting for. The Krillian swarm noticed the new arrivals immediately. A portion of their forces broke away from attacking the Vrexian fleet and oriented toward Sarah's coalition. Millions of organic ships changed course as one, flowing through space like living fluid. "They're adapting," her tactical officer warned. "The swarm is redirecting 40% of their forces toward us." "Good," Sarah said grimly. "That means 40% fewer attacking Vrexian civilians. All combat ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends." The battle that followed would be remembered in history archives for centuries. The coalition fleet fought with desperate determination. Keltharian engineers pushed their ships beyond designed limits. Dralaxian pilots performed maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Human crews operated with the stubborn refusal to surrender that characterized their species. The Silicon medical ships descended through the combat zone under heavy escort. They landed in cities where swarm forces were already attacking. Medical teams rushed into buildings to grab civilians. They loaded whoever they could reach and lifted off under fire. The Thorsian mining ships used their industrial equipment as weapons. Cargo claws designed to move asteroids grabbed swarm ships and crushed them. Mining lasers cut through organic armor. Heavy haulers rammed swarm vessels, trading their own hull integrity to destroy enemies. The Orion privateers fought with vicious efficiency. Their small fast ships slipped between swarm vessels, targeting weak points and coordination nodes. They disrupted the Hive Intelligence's command structure, creating chaos in enemy formations. Sarah watched the tactical display as thousands of ships fought across orbital space. The numbers were overwhelming. For every swarm ship destroyed, more arrived from the edges of the system. The hive mind had virtually unlimited resources. They could afford to lose ships. The coalition could not. But they were not trying to win the battle. They were trying to buy time for evacuation. On the surface, Commander Jackson's ships punched through swarm lines with raw firepower. The Vigilant took heavy damage but kept flying. They reached the research district and found it surrounded by swarm ground forces. Organic creatures the size of tanks crawled over buildings. Flying forms darkened the sky. Jackson led a ground team personally. They fought through streets filled with enemies. They found Theron in an underground shelter with 200 other Vrexian scientists and their families. The Vrexian scientist looked at the human commander with disbelief. "You came. Across the galaxy, through impossible odds, you actually came." "Admiral Mitchell sends her regards," Jackson said with a grim smile. "She said something about a promise. Now move, we have a very narrow window to get you out of here." The evacuation took 72 hours. 3 days of constant combat. 3 days of ships landing, loading civilians and lifting off under fire. 3 days of crews pushing themselves beyond exhaustion. The coalition lost 147 ships. Thousands of crew members died buying time for Vrexian civilians. But they got the job done. 3 million Vrexians were evacuated from the homeworld. Another 2 million were pulled from colonies about to fall. The swarm took the territory, but they did not get to consume the population. The Vrexian species survived. On the 3rd day, with the last transport ships leaving orbit, Sarah gave the order to withdraw. The fleet pulled back from Vrexian space in good order, covering each other's retreat. The swarm did not pursue. They had won their territory. They had no interest in chasing prey that was leaving anyway. Sarah found Theron on one of the medical ships. He sat in a corridor surrounded by Vrexian refugees. Children slept against his legs. Elderly survivors held his hands. He looked exhausted and heartbroken but alive. "We lost the homeworld," he said quietly when Sarah approached. 5,000 years of history. All our great cities. Our museums and libraries. Everything my species built. Gone. Sarah sat down beside him on the floor. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal that glowed with inner light. It was the promised token she had given him 20 years ago. He had sent it back with Commander Jackson. You told me this was a promise, Sarah said. That if you called for help, I would come. You were right. I came. But Theron, you need to understand something. I didn't come alone. She gestured to the surrounding corridor. To the ships around them. To the fleet that had traveled across the galaxy. 800 ships volunteered within hours. 17 different species. Thousands of individuals who never met you. They came because humanity remembered what you did. But more than that, they came because your compassion created a chain reaction. You helped humans, so humans helped others who helped others who helped others. Your single choice 20 years ago rippled across the entire galaxy. Theron looked at her with those golden eyes that now carried deep grief but also dawning comprehension. You lost your homeworld, Sarah continued. But you saved your species. 3 million civilians alive because you had the courage to ask for help. Because you believed that the kindness you showed would be remembered and returned. She pressed the crystal back into his hand. Keep this. Not as a promise anymore. As a reminder. A reminder that compassion is the strongest force in the galaxy. Stronger than weapons. Stronger than hate. Stronger than any swarm. 6 months later, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Every member species sent representatives. The topic was the Vrexian evacuation and the unprecedented multi-species coalition that had accomplished it. Sarah stood before the council as representatives debated. Some praised the rescue. Others condemned it as unauthorized military action. Some called for sanctions. Others demanded medals. Finally, Theron himself stood to address the council. He had been given temporary asylum in human space while his people rebuilt on colony worlds. Honored representatives, he began. 20 years ago, I violated my government's orders to help 8,000 humans facing extinction. I did this because saving lives mattered more than politics. The human commander I helped promised she would remember. When my species faced extinction, she kept that promise. But she did not come alone. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species answered her call. They came because humanity has spent decades spreading compassion across the galaxy. Theron looked around at the assembled representatives. Humans help people. They see someone in need and cannot walk away. You have all called this foolish. You have said it makes them weak. You have mocked their sentimentality. But when my species needed saving, it was human compassion that assembled an armada. It was human honor that motivated thousands of beings to risk death for strangers. He paused, letting his words settle. Perhaps humans are foolish. Perhaps compassion is weakness. Or perhaps humans understand something that we have forgotten. That every act of kindness creates bonds. That every time you help someone, you make the galaxy a little bit stronger. That civilization is not measured by weapons or territory, but by how we treat each other when it matters most. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Keltharian ambassador stood. I move that we establish the Galactic Cooperation Council. An organization dedicated to humanitarian aid and multi-species cooperation. With humanity and the Vrexian Republic as founding members. The vote was unanimous. 3 years later, Sarah stood in a garden on New Vrexia, the colony world that had become the temporary Vrexian capital. A monument had been erected here, listing the names of all who died during the evacuation. 147 ships. 7,312 individuals. 17 species. Theron stood beside her, reading the names. They died for people they never met. For a species that had isolated itself from the galaxy. Why would they do that? Sarah smiled. Because you taught us something important, Theron. You taught us that one person choosing compassion can change everything. Those 7,000 people understood that. They chose to be part of something bigger than themselves. She pointed to the top of the monument, where a single line was carved in every known language. They once aided a human. Years later, an entire armada answered the call. Theron touched the crystal he still wore around his neck. And humanity will never forget our kindness. No, Sarah agreed. But more importantly, we'll never forget what it taught us. That compassion is contagious. That kindness spreads. That every time you help someone, you create ripples that travel farther than you can imagine. She looked up at the stars visible in New Vrexia's evening sky. Your people will rebuild. Humanity will help. And when we're done, we'll help someone else. And they'll help others. And maybe, eventually, the whole galaxy will understand what you and I learned. What's that? Theron asked. Sarah smiled. That we're stronger together than apart. That helping each other is not weakness. That in the end, compassion is the only thing that really matters. Above them, ships from a dozen species moved across the sky. The Galactic Cooperation Council's first joint mission was launching. They were heading to the Outer Rim to assist refugees from another conflict. The armada that saved the Vrexians had not disbanded. It had evolved, grown, become something permanent. And it all started because one scientist chose to help 8,000 strangers, and one commander remembered to say thank you.